Thank you. I'm Nick Ferrugia. I run the media strategy and execution for Fifth Third Bank, located in Cincinnati, Ohio. I actually used to live down here for 2 years. We just moved back not too long ago, about a year ago, to Columbus, Ohio. I used to work for Hertz and run their e-commerce marketing. I want to thank Media Post for having us out here. One reason why we're here, our case study won the Media Post Paid Search Award last year. So we're thank you for having us. And then our agency Empower here, who's amazing. And I want to thank Tenley and Jennifer Jackson for helping me with the presentation. I know I'm a little high maintenance, and I apologize, but I think we got some a good presentation for you guys. And we'll get going in a minute, but I just want to say I was really excited about this presentation and wanted to do good. So a friend of ours a little while back gave me some lucky socks. They're green. They have shamrocks on them. And we have 2 dogs. One Enzo, it's about an 80-pound bulldog. And then we have a dog named Amelia, or at least everybody calls her Amelia except for me. It's a Chihuahua, and I call her Princess Diamond Pee-Pee everywhere. But she's because somehow she has missed potty training. But she's very lucky for me, so we'll see how it goes. We'll just get right into it. This is data heavy, so I'll try to keep you interested, but the direction was to really show you what we did, how we did it, and the results it was driving. When I came into Fifth Third about a year ago, Empower made some changes, our media agency, and we wanted to really drive to the bottom line. We were really challenged with, great, you can drive volume through this channel, through all the channels, but we really need high quality accounts. So it's not just about volume. You have to drive also the quality, which is a little bit harder, especially the goals they put on the quality metrics. And how we quantify quality is present value, so virtually how much revenue we're getting from it. So we were challenged not only to drive the accounts, but also drive volume. But of course, as any company will do, but we still need to make sure you hit quality, enough quality or enough volume to make this work. So they kind of gave us a strong objective and challenge, but we took it head on. Another thing we were running into is when I looked across the portfolio, it was nice to be able to look across the whole portfolio and not just certain tactics like paid search or SEO. We were able to look across the whole portfolio of tactics. And what we were finding was we had a lot of other tactics. Surprisingly, in banking, direct mail had an extremely high ROMI. So if we wanted to drive quality, we would want to maximize that channel, but obviously you have to balance all our tactics and you still have to be present in digital. So it was putting pressure on us to really turn the quality around coming in through the digital channel to drive more present value. And so at the end of the day, we took the challenge. We really made some big changes, and I'll kind of get to the strategy, what we put in place and how we got there was we took all our digital money was crossed, let's say 8 tactics, and dumped it all into paid search. And it can be risky because obviously paid search has a scale. You can maximize your branded, but there's a scale on non-branded. So we took a look at this and kind of went with this strategy. It definitely was a risk, but we calculated risk based off data. And I'll kind of walk you through what we did, how we did it, what we ran into, and what the results were. So the majority of checking, the reason why checking is so important, because the majority of relationships with a bank start with the checking account. In addition, 90% of customers, they're kind of hard to dislodge. When they're looking for a checking account, they usually go with what's in their consideration set. Fifth Third considerations, not that great. It's good as a regional bank, but when you're comparing all other banks, it's not that strong. So it's a strong headwind for us to really not only dislodge customers from their consideration, but get them to attract us. So we needed to grow and capture. So we started to do things, and this comes important later on as we got scales. We started to look what triggers move, because I worked with JP Morgan about 8 years ago, but we were looking what triggers really look at the checking account. What makes people shop for a new checking account? The biggest things were moving, relocation specifically, and then so if your bank was a regional bank and you moved to a place that didn't have that bank, you need a new bank. There's 4,300 banks, something like that. And so obviously this is a big problem for a lot of people. So how do we get people, this mass moving, these people primed for the market, how do we get them to go with us? And then a lot of people are dissatisfied for their bank and just want to move. The acquisition's short. It's about 1 day to 2 weeks. So when it's there, it's there. You have to take it, and you have to be present. We had to get a lot more efficient on our paid search, so we took a look at it, and based off of all the digital tactics, paid search had the highest present value. And now this is based off of last click attribution, what I'll get into though, but we still had to work by the numbers, and we knew we could scale paid search, so we went like, we're just going to go all in on this and see how far this goes. We knew what our branded keywords were doing, and our consideration was creeping up. And as your consideration creeps up, your opportunity to scale your branded and maximize branding becomes more. But that's not where you're really going to get your scale. It has to be a non-branded. So when I was talking about the triggers, things to get, we know the normal banking, your normal keywords or keyword sets that bring in your volume, but we really had to get smart and look at the triggers and what keyword sets we could go after there. To give you an example, so when I was at Hertz, we looked at keyword sets like travel, things that were indicators of people who are needing to rent a car, like planning vacation, things like that. The problem with that industry is those keywords were so expensive to the bottom of the line of Hertz, it didn't work. But places like Fifth Third and when I was at Nationwide, there were triggers that the bidding wasn't that high up on that we could capture and scale. So it doesn't work for every company, but for us, when I was in insurance and here at Fifth Third, I was able to apply that on these triggers to go after them. And we really got into bringing we got some smart people in banking, brought them together, especially with our Empower team, and started really looking at modeling out how we could really optimize our bids. What we did is we looked for arbitrage opportunities, is what we how we put it together. And I went to school for derivatives to be a trader. So what we did is we applied virtually portfolio management and looked for arbitrage opportunities in the market because the bidding platforms are changing all the time based off the competitive spend. So we really got smart and had to get surgical on this to squeeze as much as we could out of it. And I looked back, and it was like we didn't see the opportunities at first, but once we really started to dig and due diligence, there was a lot more opportunities than I really thought. So I'm glad I was pushed by our agency and then our leadership to really see how far was far. Another thing was when you look at it, it's not just optimizing your between the search engines. We also were looking at DMAs. We started with state, and then we got to the DMA. Even we got down to the places around our branches, because most people buy their checking accounts within a 5-mile radius of their branch. So we really started to punch out some places and get a lot more smarter to see how much volume was there. So we'll get back to it in the learnings here, but it's funny. It was really educational for me to learn. At first, when I was coming here, I was like, we got this, we could take care of it. But once we started to really dig in, I realized how much opportunity was left on the table that we could capture market share from. And then things like leveraging customer match. And then paid search is a little hard, but what we did do is what was not being done before is we were excluding customers that were already customers. So why that's important was if a lot of people, when they search for anything that you have to log in, like insurance or banking when they're checking their account, I didn't want them clicking my branded keywords or my non-branded keywords. It was mostly branded, but that would cost me money when I'm paying for them. So what I did is we started excluding them, which is no-brainer, right? But we weren't doing that in the past because more of the capability wasn't on our side. But we were able to put that in place and really reduce the number of people who were just coming to check their account. There's no relevance to checking accounts, but we were able to reduce our costs. Let's see here. We're facing headwinds, like I kind of touched on. Is we're not a big bank. We're a big regional, but in the grand scheme of things in our footprint, our consideration is average. Maybe a little, depends on where you're at, a little below or a little above. But people know us, but we really needed to kind of like say, what can we do to really increase our consideration, which our brand team was doing and pushing that up. But we really want to say, how do we increase the searches coming in? We did a lot of things on the top of the funnel, which is a whole other conversation. But what we knew what was coming in, we wanted to maximize that, and we wanted to make sure we were grabbing the people in market in our consideration set. Obviously, like all of us, we're at the mercy of the bidding platforms and algorithm changes, and we ran into a pretty big algorithm change that hit banking around August, and we were on top of it. We made the changes we were doing and able to gain some competitive advantage against our customers. And I think one thing we'll talk about at the end of this is it's just being knowledgeable of what's going on. And one thing that taught me is being very, very diligent on the spends of our competitors in the industry, trying to look for key things. And we built actually some key indicators of where we can start kind of forecasting if our competitors are picking up spend in this area. The points of diminishing return. Obviously, paid search can only go so far. And we didn't know how far was. So when we promised that we were going to transition to this model, we were taking a little risk. We don't have a test budget, so it's really great. I get to I test with my working dollars. So we had to build some models, and we had to be confident in those models to really understand where we were at on our point of diminishing return to move up. We maximized paid search, but we had a lot of non-branded words that we needed to optimize into and make sure that we could see how far was far. And all accounts are not equal. I mean, we started to learn as we did our diligence, an account from Google on these paid search words was different than an account from Bing on the same paid search words on the present value, or how they converted, or how virtually at the end of the day it's present value, but retention and all that. So we did a lot more due diligence and really got into surgically looking in the details of how customers were coming to us. And then optimization is tough for us in banking because you run off a 5-year PV. So we're taking some assumptions, and we can only optimize to cost per lead. So obviously, you can get a lead, but not all leads are equal. So we had to build some models, and I wish I could share with you the algorithms behind them and kind of the detail, but it's pretty impressive that we were able to figure out how we were able to take these leads to accounts based off of prior data and things we're seeing in the industry. So it really helped us maximize the number because we knew we could a cost per lead really low, but we found that, let's say, a good example was in social media, cost per lead was extremely low, but the cost per account was really high, and the present value was extremely low. So it was looking at it from one metric, you could make a different decision if you're optimizing to a different metric. And also, a cost per account doesn't dictate the present value. So we weighed all these levers to figure out virtually the sales funnel, how it work. So I've talked a little bit about this, but we optimize, figure out the points of diminishing returns, not only for search engines, but keyword sets and geographies. So we had all these levers and all these models we looked at on a weekly basis. And we had to look at it, and some stuff you can only get on a monthly basis, but a lot of this we looked at a weekly basis and just optimized it, managed it to the nines. And it started to get fun because it started kind of be a guessing game of how far we could push results. And you'll see we got some pretty good results out of it. Just because we were diligent, we built the right models, and we figured out what levers we needed to really optimize to and pull throughout the sales funnel. We started to get into things like landing pages, moving buttons around, changing words, what worked best. And some of this stuff, honestly, I was like, there's no way turning the button over here is going to make that big a difference. And they made significant differences to get us. And I knew this in the past when we did things, but I've never seen results like this. And it was just fun to start to see. We were kind of taking side bets, like what's going to work, what's not. It was just we made a game out to make it fun, even though there was some pressure behind it. But we ended up just changing some things around, used data to see what worked, talked to some experts in the industry, and kind of figured out what would work and what not for us. And then one big thing is we learned that I thought a lot of people coming in from online would want to put their accounts online. And if I removed the option of giving them the online account, we would lose the business. What we found is a lot of people, actually, it was even customer choice, preferred to go into the branch. And this was great for us because branch had a PV 2 times higher than online. So we were pulling every leverage from customer choice, where you go into, to geos, to search engines, everything. So it was all it is I can say is it was a one big math equation that we were optimizing to in real time. We talked about the ad copy we went through, and then we revisited some markets we previously weren't in due to fraud, and we were able to change the wording and changed how they fulfilled to really go back into the markets to gain scale. And anytime you can tap into something you didn't tap into before, and still the value's there, it propels you. So here's where we were at. I restated the objective here. Drive quality accounts. The biggest thing was present value. we increased present value. So virtually net profit on all these accounts coming in 47%, based off everything we were pulling. I think the average they were increasing was actually I think they were going down when we first came in on the present value. The landing page conversion, we saw a lift of 35%. So all this, obviously, all these levers ended up pushing the present value because that's what the goal was. Branch fulfillment, we were able to change some things, went up 36%, and we were keeping customers happy still. They still had customer choice, which is how we worded things, how we positioned it, helped these things. Cost per account, this is interesting. It did go up, but we were driving more quality accounts that had a higher present value. So if we were optimizing just the cost per account, we actually would have hurt the bottom line because it depends on where that account books or where it came from. So we balanced all this, and it took us a little while to not really figure it out, but it just took us a while to fine-tune it in to where the math equation started producing more on the bottom line when our CPA went up compared to our benchmark. Average balances, which drives PV, went up 64%. So if they brought $1, we were at $1.65, right, or 64. We exceeded the account minimum, which we kind of were nervous about because this stuff you don't see real time a lot of it. So we exceeded our account minimums and drove higher quality, which was because usually on things like banking or stuff, or you can go, or even on insurance when we were there, we could drive one account that has a PV of 500 or 10 accounts that could drive it of 200. When you go lower in the scale, you usually have a higher return because you're picking the bottom fruit out. But we were able to do that. And then we were also able to figure out the best champion offer, which we didn't have in the past, and which was our $250 premium offer. So here's kind of some techie stuff. So this is the logarithmic curve at points of diminishing return. So statistics, you have the R-squared correlation between your X and Y axis. And what we did is on the left, you have 2018, and you'll see as we spent more, it started to get more fragmented, of course, right? Because you spend more money, you're getting less efficient. What we did is we learned that fragmentation came late. We were pushing each quarter. In Q4, we really started to push it. And you'll see overnight, it was virtually overnight on the spend, it just fell off a curve. I mean, it just fell off. So we learned really quickly that it was a tight diminishing return curve. Once you hit a certain spend, it just falls off. Even no matter what we did, change keywords and some things. So we were able to figure out our sweet spot on paid search, and then it comes down to portfolio management is once we get more money, we showed we can maximize this money, then what's the next best offer? Or what's the next best tactic? And then now, one thing we're testing into, we'll talk about at the end, is we're testing into the logarithmic curves of our other tactics. So it's pure portfolio management theory. So here's something I have a little egg on my face on, and I'll admit it. And so our partners at Empower are probably laughing at me right now. When I came in, I cut all social media. Same thing I did at some other companies. Now I put it back in a little bit based off as I learned what their value was. But like I talked about before, social media was the cost per lead and cost per account were awesome, but the present values were horrible. So if my goal was just to drive accounts, which was not, they changed it, was to drive quality accounts, I would just maximize my social media. So what I did learn is I was always a big proponent that social media works at really high levels. It really get efficiency at high levels. You could do some lower level spend in social media, or display. Here's the example of social, but we had, let's say, GDN and stuff like that display. And so what we did is we tested into this a little bit, and so a lot of pressure from my agency. And what we found is there's levels. So really low levels, and we kind of knew this, but we didn't know how low. And it's a decent investment, but it's not astronomical. It really impacts the performance of your paid search. There's a correlation there. Obviously, not everybody knows this, but we were trying to figure out what that level of spend was because we were trying to hit it because there's some correlation, but what level is it? So we were able to fine tune this pretty tight to where we know how much exactly to spend, and exactly is relative, but pretty tight on how much we need to spend in social to really help our paid search. So if you look at it, you can see that as we spent more money in social and display, that our leads or our search leads went up. And then we did this in a very tight test environment, so there wasn't like media and everything else involved in TV. But what we found is we knew there was a ceiling, there's something really low that we hit, and then obviously as you spend more than the $10, $15 million, it really starts to make an impact in. But this was a great learning for us, and we were able to get a big boost on it. I don't know if I can give the percentage, but it's pretty good to give us continued optimization and continued growth. So we're not done optimizing into this. So in 2019, we're going to continue based off these spend levels. Now, if our spend levels, these are pretty high spend levels actually, too. And as we continue our spend levels, we will be going into other tactics as it gets a lot higher. But our spend level significantly increased in paid search. And we're going to continue that. We know our points of diminishing return. And then now the thing we're getting into is seasonality. We know the averages, but now let's tighten it up by quarter and potentially by month. And the amount of optimization and profitability there is going to be pretty significant. So we're going to continue to work into this. So Q1 compared to the past, we're up 44% more accounts through paid search. Like if somebody told me that a year ago, I'm like, there's no way that it's even going to be quality. We have a 35% lower search only on the CPA, so we figured out the CPA problem, and then 80% redemption of the branch, which just drives the PV. Because the bankers are talking to them, they like, hey, why don't you open a savings account, a credit card, right? All those things add to your PV. Learnings, we touched on. We established the points of diminishing returns. Keeping a pulse on your competitor spend, especially in a commoditized industry, has been key. We were trying to figure out ways to do this, but we're starting to figure out little triggers, things to look at to really get into this, and because that's what really messes with that bidding platform. And we'll see our competitors, for some reason, we saw Chase just spike for no reason, but it threw everything off. So everything we knew to be true was off. Now we look for these things and we adjust accordingly. Because we're not strong enough to push the market, they can push the market. And one reason why they pushed is they foresaw this algorithmic change coming, knew it hit that was in late August, and they were able to make an adjustment, but they were big enough to move the needle on it where it hurt the bidding platform. We identified the key KPIs like anybody would. We're looking at industry trends, like I said, the algorithm, new technologies. We're always looking at this stuff. We've looked at everything from, I don't know if you guys talked about like Red Ventures, who have a lot of traders on their team to look for new opportunities. And we just look at every partner we possibly can. And then the good news is we have benchmarks now. We know we're very tight, so we can say either you hit the CPA or and at this present value, we'll test into you, and we can just rotate through everybody selling us. And then for me, I think there's more me. Probably you guys are all better than me on this, but I just keep an open mind because I didn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater a lot, and I kind of was in some cases. And just keep an open mind. Our agency's awesome. They sit me down and be like, I know what you need to be true, but can we test into this or look into this? And it's been really helpful, and we've been able to make a lot of progress. So, what questions do you have?
Nick, thanks very much. That was a lot to absorb. That was great. We have time for questions. Anybody?
Pretty good.
Give us a little more detail on the social channel. Which social channels you chose, where you saw some of the best performance. Was there differentiation among them?
Yeah, so some of the channels we're using, like Inbox and Facebook Display, Google. And we found that Facebook, at the right levels and the right places, based off their programmatic targeting, we could get a lot out of it. And we just maximize. We're just stepping into it. And I think one of the key parts was the aggressive testing. We quickly tested. We made it aggressive. We read our reads and went on and kept on building on it to make the progress we made in a short amount of time. And but right now, the low levels we're pushing into, that we're especially going to start testing into, is Facebook. And then what we were able to do is, I don't know if before, like always on social, which was in our company was built to just build brand. What we started to do is work with them more and say, our hypothesis is one thing we're testing into is you can also build your brand, but you can put an offer. You can skim some of that money for your always on and put an offer. So not only is it driving better, more stronger demand generation, but all boats are rising because we think it'll actually keep the trajectory of the consideration. So we're maximizing everybody's money. And so it's just a matter of, one good news is how they put me in this role is that we can look over all media with our agency. So we're optimizing across everything so you don't have silos. And usually in banks, you have marketing teams for each product, and then you have the brand. We're able to look over everything to make a stronger relationship. And in this environment, it has to be like that, because you can't be, because everything works out there, especially on like SEO and stuff like that. We're not getting that, but like the SEO part, making them all work together helps everything, especially paid search.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that synergies with paid search and social. Were you changing your targeting strategy? If you were moving away from general branding on social, were you then changing your targeting strategy and learning from taking learnings from search to
so as
tweak the targeting?
We're taking a lot of messaging learnings and some of the targeting learnings that we were seeing, and then now we're testing into that now. So on the social platforms. And
then you mentioned that you were surprised by some of the tweaks in your landing pages that were having impact. Could you give us is there an example or two of what you were seeing on the content side and the landing page side that were actually, optimizing what you were getting from search?
Yeah, so obviously I'm very mathematical, so when somebody tells me, and I know this, like, when you change the buttons, it does things, but we didn't realize it would have that big of effect. So it was a lot of things that made the progress was just changing the page around to make it more user-friendly. We've changed some buttons. We changed one button. It was I think it was like a dark blue to green. And those little changes, which I agree with, I've seen in the past, but some of the things we made, just reformatting the page a little bit to best practices and continuing to watch best practices from what other people were doing. And then we talked to our Google reps and just said, hey, what are other people doing? What are you guys seeing success at? And whatever they were able to share at that point, we were able to get some learnings from them to really find some of this.
Did you have a sense of what was really moving the needle when it came to present value, increasing present value? Was it that you were simply targeting better on the front end, or were you actually working with them on the content side, on the landing side, to increase that? What was really moving that? We could tell you what we knew the percentages of everything was moving through the funnel. So we knew where our biggest gains were, and it's more. We were able to. We kind of did a bottoms-up approach. So what we did is what's the ideal account? Where did it come from? How did it book? How much money was in it? What was the person looking like? And then what we did is we worked up the funnel to find those, and then we expanded from there to really maximize who we could go after and what they look like. So a Google customer that searches for, let's say, checking account premium, and they book in the branch, they live in Columbus, Ohio, was the top thing. But that changes, so because the geos have been changing, which has really surprised me. They've been changing on almost a quarterly basis on what's profitable or not. So what we're doing is we're very fluent. So we watch everything, we keep it, and then we make assessments and try to go from there. The problem is some of this is our models might forecast Columbus, Ohio is the place to really maximize and increase your bids. And then let's say something happens that does that. But we're pretty on it, and we put enough models in place now. We learned our lesson. We got burned a couple times. But now we put the models in place to really be more fluent and optimize on a real-time basis, relatively as for a bank, real-time. And finally, and then I'll shut up. You mentioned that how important it was to keep an eye on competitors and what they're bidding. So when you got that spike from Chase that was sort of changing the market, how did you adjust? What were the counter strategies to that?
So that's a good point. So what happened was it was a bad timing for us. We changed our offer to a checking and a savings offer, and we thought it was the offer. So then we got away from that offer, and it kept on happening, and then we dug into it more, and what it was is the bidding platforms were changing, and the bids were actually going up for certain key sets. We have thousands of keyword sets, and we did more due diligence. We were able to figure out fast enough to migrate back, but at first, it happened almost immediately right when we changed the offer, and it wasn't the offer at all. Actually, the offer it could become our new champion. It was a matter of a competitor spend pushing certain keywords we were going after.
Nick Ferrugia, that was great. Thank you very much.